beneath a rock on the seafloor, a father fish has spent days guarding his eggs. He has fanned water across them continuously to keep them oxygenated. He has driven away every predator that came close. He has barely eaten. By every measure, he is doing exactly what a parent is supposed to do, protecting the next generation at cost to himself, without hesitation, without rest. And then he eats some of them, not because something has gone wrong, not because he is starving, because under the conditions the ocean has placed him in, consuming part of his own brood is, according to the mathematics of survival that evolution has been running for hundreds of millions of years, the decision most likely to leave descendants in the future. Elsewhere, a mother carries her developing young safely inside her mouth for weeks, only to swallow some of them because her own body has reached a point where the offspring themselves become the only energy reserve available. Scientists have now documented this behavior in hundreds of fish species across the world's oceans. It is not rare. It is not a malfunction. It is a strategy, one that the ocean has been selecting for, refining, and passing forward for longer than most animals on Earth have existed. And on the other end of the spectrum, more than 1,000 meters below the surface, in cold darkness, a deep-sea octopus guards her eggs for 4.5 years without eating a single meal. She stays until the last egg hatches. Then she dies. The ocean did not produce monsters. It produced parents, each one shaped by the specific pressures of the world they inhabit, solving the same problem in ways that look nothing like each other. Tonight, we go into that world and into the extraordinary biology behind one of the strangest parenting strategies in the history of life. Across the oceans, countless lives begin without ever meeting a parent. Clouds of tiny eggs drift into open water, carried by currents that neither shelter nor guide them. For most fish, this has long been the simplest answer to survival. An Atlantic cod, for example, may release as many as 9 million eggs during a single spawning event, scattering them into an immense world where chance becomes the primary guardian. Almost all will disappear into waiting mouths, changing tides, or the slow demands of the sea itself. Yet if even a small handful survive, the lineage continues, and evolution counts the attempt as a success. Another path emerged through time, far less common and far more demanding. Instead of producing overwhelming numbers, certain species began producing fewer offspring while investing directly in each one. Eggs were placed beneath rocks, inside shells, among coral, or upon carefully prepared surfaces. Parents remained nearby instead of departing. They guarded, cleaned, ventilated, and defended these fragile beginnings with remarkable persistence, exchanging abundance for attention in a world where neither came without cost. From the outside, such devotion appears generous. Beneath the surface, every act carries a measurable price. A parent remaining over a nest cannot wander in search of food with the same freedom as before. Every sweep of the fins that pushes fresh water across developing embryos consumes stored energy. Every charge toward a hungry predator risks torn flesh, exhaustion, or death. The work continues through daylight and darkness alike, while the parent's own reserves gradually diminish. Biologists describe this exchange with the term parental investment. It refers to any expenditure of time, energy, or personal risk that improves the chances of current offspring surviving, while reducing the parent's ability to produce future offspring. The definition appears simple, yet within it lies one of the deepest principles shaping life beneath the waves. Every resource committed to one generation becomes unavailable for another. Every decision carries consequences, extending beyond the nest, resting directly before the parent's eyes. The arithmetic never pauses. A father remaining with his brood cannot spend those same hours attracting another mate. The strength consumed defending one clutch cannot be recovered instantly for the next breeding attempt. Even successful care leaves a body weaker than before, requiring food recovery and opportunity before reproduction can begin again. The sea rewards persistence, but it also rewards endurance, and those two demands are not always aligned. Conditions beneath the surface rarely remain predictable for long. Food may appear in abundance one week and vanish the next. Storms reshape coastlines, currents shift, predators patrol familiar territories with relentless consistency. Breeding seasons open and close according to rhythms no individual parent can influence. Within such uncertainty, survival depends not only upon protecting offspring already present, but also upon remaining capable of reproducing again if circumstances change. Natural selection, therefore, favors more than devotion alone. It favors balance. A parent that sacrifices every reserve for a brood destined to fail leaves nothing with which to begin again. Another parent that preserves enough strength to survive another season may ultimately contribute far more descendants across an entire lifetime. The comparison feels almost mathematical because, over immense spans of evolutionary history, it has become exactly that. Countless generations have refined these invisible calculations without intention or awareness, leaving only behaviors that consistently returned the greatest success. Seen through this lens, the parents inhabiting these coastal nests become something unexpected. They are guardians, yet also careful allocators of limited resources. Each movement, each vigil, each withheld meal represents an investment weighed against an uncertain future. The ocean did not grant them endless abundance. Instead, it shaped lives, able to navigate scarcity with extraordinary precision, where the value of protecting the present is measured continually against the possibility of tomorrow. Among the shifting sands of Europe's shallow coasts lives a fish so small that it could rest comfortably across the width of a human palm. The common goby, known to science as Pomatoschistus microps, seldom grows beyond 6 centimeters, which is about 2.4 inches. It inhabits estuaries and sheltered shorelines, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the North Atlantic coast, building its life in places where tides rise and fall with dependable rhythm. Beneath an empty mussel shell or a fragment of stone resting on the seafloor, the male prepares a chamber that will become both nursery and fortress. Once a female deposits her eggs upon the roof of that shelter, her role comes to an end. She departs, leaving every remaining responsibility to the father. He does not follow. Instead, he settles beneath the shell and begins a period of care that has become one of the best documented examples of parental devotion in any marine fish. Grain by grain, he removes debris that might threaten the developing embryos. With steady movements of his pectoral fins, he pushes fresh, oxygen-rich water across the clutch. Whenever another creature approaches too closely, he rushes forward in defense, even when the intruder outweighs him many times over. His task often becomes even greater as the breeding season progresses. More females may choose the same nest, each adding another layer of eggs to those already attached above him. Hundreds can become thousands, gathered within a shelter scarcely larger than the fish himself. Throughout this period, he continues guarding, cleaning, and ventilating every developing embryo while feeding little, if at all. The nest becomes the center of his existence, and every passing day slowly draws upon the energy stored within his own body. Because this balance between care and survival appeared so delicate, researchers sought to understand exactly where it might begin to change. At Vermina Zoological Station in Finland, scientists conducted a carefully controlled series of experiments during 2011 and 2012, later publishing their findings in Ecology and Evolution during 2016. Their goal was not merely to observe fathers consuming eggs, but to discover why the behavior emerged when it did. The researchers separated two influences that had often become tangled together in earlier studies. They controlled how much food each male received, while also adjusting the size of the clutch under his care. By changing these conditions independently, they could distinguish the effects of hunger from the effects of brood size, allowing each factor to reveal its own contribution to the father's behavior. Some results followed expectations. Males receiving less food consumed more of their own eggs than males provided with abundant nourishment. A body running low on energy became more likely to reclaim part of the investment already resting above its head. Hunger clearly mattered, confirming that the father's physical condition shaped the decisions unfolding within the nest. Yet another pattern emerged alongside it, one that carried far greater significance. Food alone could not explain everything. Some fathers consumed eggs under circumstances that suggested a more complex calculation was unfolding, one that could not be reduced to starvation by itself. The value of the brood, the effort required to maintain it, and the opportunities that still remained within the breeding season all appeared to influence the outcome together. Rather than revealing an exhausted parent acting without restraint, the study uncovered a biological strategy responding to several conditions at once, each quietly altering the balance between present investment and future success. The common goby, despite its modest size, became one of the clearest windows through which scientists could watch that ancient balance taking shape beneath the sea. The turning point does not announce itself with exhaustion or visible struggle. It arrives as an invisible balance, shifting almost imperceptibly until the value of continuing no longer outweighs the cost. To any observer, the nest appears unchanged. The father still occupies the shelter. The eggs remain attached overhead. Yet within his biology, a calculation refined across immense stretches of evolutionary time has reached a different answer. The experiments with common gobies revealed one of the most surprising outcomes in the study of parental care. Even males provided with abundant food, individuals whose stomachs were no longer burdened by immediate hunger sometimes consumed an entire clutch of eggs. Their decision could not be explained by starvation alone. Something more fundamental was directing the behavior, something rooted not in the father's present condition, but in the relationship between what the brood demanded and what it could ultimately return. That relationship is not governed by a fixed count of eggs. No universal number separates a brood worth protecting from one destined to disappear. Instead, the boundary changes according to proportion. A clutch containing too few developing embryos may require nearly the same effort as a much larger one. The father must still remain within the nest, maintain the flow of oxygen-rich water, repel approaching predators, and postpone opportunities to reproduce again. When the expected reward falls beneath the energetic and reproductive expense required to preserve it, the balance shifts. At that moment, the nest itself changes meaning. The eggs no longer represent only future offspring. They become stored energy, capable of restoring the father's condition while also releasing him from the responsibilities that bind him to a single place. He consumes every embryo attached above him. None remain under his protection. The nest is cleared, his body regains valuable nutrients, and he returns to searching for another reproductive opportunity before the breeding season slips away. Biologists distinguish this behavior with precise language. The complete consumption of an entire brood is known as total filial cannibalism. It differs from partial filial cannibalism in which only a portion of the eggs are eaten, while care continues for those that remain. The distinction is more than terminology. It reflects two entirely different outcomes produced by the same underlying system, each selected according to changing circumstances rather than fixed instinct alone. Evidence from another marine fish illustrates how rapidly this threshold can be crossed. The barred chin blenny, known scientifically as Rhabdoblennius nitidus, inhabits coastal waters around Japan and may guard as many as 2,500 eggs during a breeding cycle. Researchers discovered that when a newly received clutch remained below roughly 1,000 eggs, total filial cannibalism often occurred within the first 0.36 days of care, frequently only hours after the eggs had been deposited. The father did not spend days attempting to preserve an investment already judged insufficient. The assessment happened almost immediately before substantial energy had been committed. Speed itself became part of the adaptation. Delaying the decision would only increase the cost of guarding a brood already unlikely to justify continued investment. Acting early preserved strength, reduced wasted effort, and reopened the possibility of attracting another female, while favorable conditions still remained. Evolution therefore favored not hesitation, but efficiency, allowing the father to respond before the balance shifted even further against him. Seen through this lens, the transformation appears neither sudden nor contradictory. The attentive guardian and the consuming predator are expressions of the same biological program, separated only by a threshold that cannot be seen from outside the nest. The ocean shaped that threshold with extraordinary precision, placing it deep within the father's behavior, where care continues faithfully until the mathematics of survival settle upon a different course. One experiment transformed an unsettling idea into measurable evidence. Until then, it remained possible to argue that fathers consumed their own eggs simply because hunger overwhelmed their behavior, or because unusual conditions disrupted ordinary parental care. Researchers studying the three-spined stickleback, known scientifically as Gasterosteus aculeatus, approached the question from a different direction. Rather than asking whether fathers ate their offspring, they asked what happened to the fathers themselves after doing so. The three-spined stickleback has occupied a remarkable place in behavioral biology for generations. Its courtship, nest building, territorial defense, and parental care have been examined so extensively that it became one of the best understood vertebrates in the study of animal behavior. That familiarity made it an ideal subject for testing whether filial cannibalism carried a measurable physiological benefit rather than serving as an unfortunate side effect of starvation. At the University of Bonn, researchers designed a carefully controlled experiment, publishing their findings in the journal Naturwissenschaften during 2009. The arrangement was deliberately simple. Male sticklebacks were separated into two groups. Every individual experienced the same shortage of food and the same general conditions. The only meaningful difference was that one group guarded nests containing eggs, while the other guarded empty nests where no eggs were available for consumption. The fathers caring for eggs remained free to behave naturally. If they chose to consume part of the brood, nothing prevented them. The fathers tending empty nests faced identical hunger, yet possessed no nutritional reserve hidden within their care. As the experiment unfolded, the contrast between the two groups became unmistakable. Every single male, with access to eggs, consumed at least a portion of his own offspring. Not one resisted entirely. The behavior appeared across the entire group, suggesting that under these conditions, it was not an exceptional response produced by unusual individuals. Instead, it emerged as a consistent feature of the species' biology, whenever the necessary circumstances were present. The consequences for the fathers proved even more revealing. Those that consumed eggs maintained their body mass throughout the experiment. Their physical condition remained remarkably stable despite the continued lack of outside food. Meanwhile, the males guarding empty nests steadily lost weight and showed measurable declines in overall condition. They invested the same effort into defending territory and maintaining parental behavior, yet, without access to the eggs themselves, their own bodies gradually paid the price. The relationship extended even further. Researchers found that body condition rose in direct proportion to the number of eggs consumed. Fathers eating larger portions of their brood finished the experiment in better physical condition than fathers consuming only a few. The pattern formed a clear biological gradient, linking nutritional recovery directly to filial cannibalism rather than to chance or individual variation. These findings altered the way scientists understood the eggs resting inside a nest. They represented future offspring, certainly, but they also functioned as a reserve of stored energy created by reproduction itself. Nutrients invested during spawning had not disappeared. They remained concentrated within the embryos, available to be reclaimed if circumstances shifted against successful parental care. Evolution had not merely produced offspring, it had also created a resource that could preserve the parent responsible for producing future generations. From the perspective of the father, this reserve remains untouched while conditions favor continued care. The developing embryos retain their greatest value as descendants waiting to hatch. Yet, when survival begins tipping in another direction, those same embryos become nourishment, capable of restoring strength and extending reproductive opportunity. The transformation is not emotional or symbolic. It is physiological, measurable, and repeatable. Within the economy of the ocean, the brood functions much like an insurance policy, held in reserve until the cost of preserving it exceeds the benefit it can still provide. There comes a point in scientific discovery when a single observation dissolves an explanation that once seemed complete. Up to this moment, every example suggested that filial cannibalism emerged only when circumstances became unfavorable, when food disappeared, when a brood grew too small to justify continued care, or when a father's own survival began slipping beyond recovery. The Cortez damselfish offered a different picture entirely, one in which the behavior appeared even when none of those pressures were present. The Cortez damselfish, known scientifically as Stigastes rectifranum, inhabits rocky reefs throughout the central Gulf of California. Small in size, yet intensely territorial, each breeding male establishes and defends a nesting site where several females may deposit eggs across the spawning season. Like the fathers already encountered, he remains with the brood after spawning, maintaining the nest while successive clutches accumulate beneath his care. Food remains available around the reef. Predators exist at ordinary levels, and the surrounding environment continues according to its familiar rhythms. Because these conditions reflected ordinary life rather than experimental manipulation, they offered an opportunity to observe paternal behavior exactly as evolution had shaped it. In a landmark investigation published in the journal Evolution during 1989, researcher Christopher Peterson carefully measured how frequently these fathers consumed their own offspring while living under natural conditions. No shortage of food was imposed, no artificial stress was introduced. The fish behaved as they would on any typical breeding season across the reef. The results departed sharply from previous expectations. Male Cortez damselfish consumed an average of 28.3% of every clutch entrusted to them. More than 1/4 of their own developing offspring disappeared, not during exceptional hardship, but as part of ordinary parental care. This pattern repeated across the population with such consistency that it could no longer be interpreted as an emergency response. It represented the normal operating state of the species. That realization changed the meaning of filial cannibalism. Instead of serving merely as a last resort during difficult times, it appeared woven directly into the reproductive strategy itself. The father was not abandoning care because circumstances had deteriorated beyond repair. He was managing his brood according to principles that remained active even when resources were sufficient and the nest remained secure. His choices also displayed remarkable precision. The eggs selected for consumption were not random. Younger embryos, still early in development, disappeared more frequently than those approaching hatching. At first glance, the preference seems subtle, yet it reflects another layer of biological economy. Newly laid eggs represent only a small investment of time and energy. Older embryos have already received many days of ventilation, protection, and maintenance. Preserving those nearly completed offspring protects the greatest accumulated return on the father's continuing effort. This pattern became even clearer when nests contained several clutches deposited on different days. Freshly laid eggs rested beside embryos already nearing the end of development, creating a natural comparison within the same shelter. Again and again, the father consumed the youngest eggs while leaving the oldest largely untouched. He was not simply feeding, he was adjusting the composition of the brood, removing those requiring the greatest remaining investment while preserving those closest to success. The reef itself remained unchanged throughout these observations. Food continued drifting across the territory. Rival fish defended neighboring nests. Courtship proceeded in familiar cycles beneath clear coastal waters. Nothing about the surrounding environment suggested crisis. Yet more than 1 out of every 4 developing offspring vanished as part of ordinary reproductive behavior, repeated season after season across healthy populations. Seen together, these observations reveal another refinement in the ocean's long experiment with parental care. Filial cannibalism was not assembled merely as a safeguard against failure. In the Cortez damselfish, it became an ordinary tool, integrated into successful reproduction itself, demonstrating that the same behavior capable of rescuing a parent during hardship could also improve reproductive efficiency when conditions seemed entirely favorable. A developing fish egg is never truly the same from one day to the next. Its appearance shifts so gradually that the changes seem almost impossible to notice without careful observation. Yet, for the father tending the nest, those subtle transformations become meaningful signals. What appears to human eyes as a nearly identical collection of translucent spheres is, to him, a landscape filled with differences that carry profound consequences for the future of the brood. As an embryo grows, its physical character changes in several ways. Color slowly deepens. Density alters as tissues become more complex. Texture evolves with development, and the chemical compounds surrounding the egg change as living processes continue within. These differences are not merely byproducts of growth. Across several species of fish, guarding fathers have demonstrated the ability to distinguish between these developmental stages and to alter their behavior accordingly. The importance of this ability becomes clear only when viewed alongside the reproductive calculations already unfolding within the nest. Every passing day represents additional parental investment. Oxygen has been delivered continuously. Predators have been driven away repeatedly. Time that could have been devoted to attracting another mate has instead been devoted to protecting the embryos already present. The farther an egg progresses toward hatching, the greater the parent's accumulated investment becomes. Researchers Vallon and Heubel explored this remarkable capacity in another investigation involving the common goby. Instead of presenting fathers with broods whose eggs all shared the same developmental age, they created mixed clutches containing both newly laid eggs and embryos already several days older. The fathers encountered two stages of development occupying the same nest at the same time, providing an opportunity to reveal whether age itself influenced their choices. The outcome displayed striking consistency. When fathers consumed part of the brood, they selected the younger eggs far more frequently than the older ones. This preference appeared repeatedly, demonstrating that the fish were not feeding randomly among whatever embryos happened to lie closest. They were distinguishing developmental age and responding to it with remarkable reliability. The biological logic behind this pattern becomes increasingly elegant the longer it is considered. An older embryo carries nearly the full value of every day already invested in its protection. Destroying it would erase almost the entire return expected from that effort. A newly laid egg, by contrast, has received comparatively little investment. Sacrificing it preserves most of the work already completed, while recovering energy that may still improve the survival of the remaining brood. From the father's perspective, the younger eggs represent the least expensive loss. This behavior, therefore, extends beyond simple feeding. It becomes a form of selective management, one in which each developing embryo possesses a different biological value according to its age. The father is not reacting to convenience or proximity. He is preserving those offspring representing the greatest accumulated investment, while removing those whose loss carries the smallest overall cost. The females of another species, the barred chin blenny, appear to have responded to this paternal strategy through evolution itself. Rather than depositing eggs with any available guarding male, females show a preference for nests already containing older, late-stage embryos. A father protecting offspring close to hatching has comparatively little incentive to abandon the brood entirely because so much investment has already been made. Fresh eggs placed beside those older embryos therefore gain protection from the value already present within the nest. Over countless generations, these complementary behaviors have become intertwined. Fathers refine their ability to distinguish developmental stages. Females refine their ability to place offspring where those distinctions work in their favor. Neither adaptation exists in isolation. Each has shaped the evolution of the other, producing an intricate biological dialogue that unfolds without planning or awareness. Within a nesting chamber scarcely larger than a human fist, this exchange continues with extraordinary precision. The father's choices and the mother's responses reveal a system that has been adjusted repeatedly across evolutionary time, each generation adding another subtle refinement until the smallest differences between neighboring eggs became enough to influence the future of an entire lineage. Long before biologists gave this behavior a name, another observer had already been responding to it across countless generations. She left no written record and conducted no experiment, yet every successful brood carried evidence of what she had learned. The female fish had been adapting to fathers capable of consuming their own offspring for so long that the responses became woven into the ordinary rhythm of reproduction itself. One of her most effective strategies is timing. In several species, females do not choose a nesting male at random or deposit eggs whenever the opportunity first appears. Instead, they favor fathers already caring for embryos approaching the end of development. A male whose existing brood is nearing hatching has already invested substantial energy in protecting it. Because abandoning such a nest would erase days of accumulated effort, newly deposited eggs placed alongside those older embryos gain an unexpected measure of security. They enter a nest where the father's own calculations already lean toward continued care. Selection extends beyond timing alone. Females also evaluate the condition of the male himself. His physical health, the size of the brood already under his protection, and the developmental stage of those embryos all provide clues about the likelihood that their own offspring will survive. In certain species, females even respond to patterns in a male's previous behavior, favoring individuals whose history suggests greater stability as caregivers. Every choice before spawning becomes an investment directed toward reducing the chance that the brood will later disappear. Some fish solve the problem through constant proximity. In species where both parents remain with the nest, the mother's role extends beyond producing eggs. She frequently positions herself between the developing embryos and the male, remaining close enough to observe his movements as care continues. Her attention focuses not only upon predators approaching from outside, but also upon the father himself. If he approaches the clutch without performing the familiar movements associated with ventilation and maintenance, her response may become immediate. Studies of these co-parenting species have described an elegant division of responsibility. Fathers often patrol the surrounding territory, confronting intruders before they reach the nest. Mothers remain nearer the eggs, tending them while also occupying the space separating the brood from the male. What appears at first to be a simple sharing of parental duties also functions as continual observation, reducing opportunities for the father to consume embryos without interference. When that interference becomes necessary, the interactions can grow surprisingly direct. Researchers have documented physical confrontations after females detect paternal cannibalism. The male attempts to consume part of the clutch, while the female blocks, chases, or attacks him in defense of the embryos. Their disagreement reflects more than immediate behavior. Although both parents share a genetic connection to the offspring, the female is equally related to every egg she produced. The father's calculations, shaped by future reproductive opportunities and changing energetic returns, do not always preserve her interests in the same way. Other females distribute risk rather than confronting it directly. Instead of placing an entire clutch with one father, they divide their eggs among several nests guarded by different males. This strategy resembles an investment spread across multiple possibilities. If one father consumes his brood, another may continue guarding successfully, preserving at least part of the next generation despite the uncertainty surrounding any single nest. Taken together, these behaviors reveal something extending far beyond individual decisions. Every refinement in paternal selectivity has encouraged a corresponding refinement in maternal strategy. Every adjustment by females has, in turn, altered the pressures acting upon males. Across immense spans of evolutionary history, each generation has responded to the other, producing an intricate exchange that has shaped bodies, behavior, breeding schedules, and reproductive choices alike. Within nesting chambers scattered across reefs, estuaries, and rocky shores, this enduring conflict continues, without ceremony, hidden from ordinary view, yet steadily guiding the evolution of both parents through the same enduring conversation. Not every nest belongs entirely to the father guarding it. Beneath the surface, another uncertainty can reshape the value of every egg long before hunger, brood size, or developmental age enter the calculation. The uncertainty is ancestry itself. A devoted male may defend a clutch with unwavering persistence while never realizing that some of the embryos above him carry another father's genes. This possibility arises because reproduction in most fish follows an external process of fertilization. A female deposits her eggs upon a suitable surface, and the guarding male releases sperm across them after they have been laid. During those brief moments, another male may rush into the spawning event and release his own sperm as well. These intruders, often described by biologists as sneaker males, because they exploit brief opportunities rather than defending territories themselves, leave almost no visible trace of their presence before disappearing again. The consequences extend far beyond that fleeting encounter. A territorial father may spend days or weeks protecting a brood that contains offspring he never fathered. He ventilates the eggs, drives away predators, and steadily exhausts his own energy, while another male has contributed nothing beyond a brief moment during spawning. From the perspective of evolutionary success, this represents an enormous loss. Every hour devoted to unrelated offspring is an hour unavailable for producing descendants carrying the father's own genetic inheritance. Researchers studying the fish Telmetharina sericinorum from Lake Sulawesi examined how males responded as opportunities for this hidden fertilization increased. Their work, published in The American Naturalist, revealed a striking pattern as the number of competing fertilizing males present during spawning rose, the rate of filial cannibalism increased as well. One rival produced approximately a threefold increase in egg consumption. Two or more rivals raised that response to nearly sixfold. The father's behavior shifted in direct proportion to the growing uncertainty surrounding the brood's ancestry. Other species reveal different pieces of the same puzzle. Male bluegill sunfish possess the remarkable ability to recognize unrelated juveniles after hatching through chemical signals carried in the surrounding water. Their sense of smell allows them to detect offspring that do not belong to them, and paternal cannibalism increases when those unfamiliar chemical signatures become more common within the nest. At later developmental stages, ancestry becomes easier to estimate through biological cues. The earliest stages present a far greater challenge. Freshly fertilized eggs from different fathers remain almost impossible to distinguish. No visible mark separates one embryo from another, and the guarding male cannot reliably identify which developing offspring carry his own genes. Faced with uncertainty, his behavior follows probability rather than certainty. One of the most revealing discoveries emerged from genetic testing of stomach contents collected from wild guarding males. Published during 2001 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America, the analysis confirmed that fathers were consuming their own biological offspring alongside unrelated embryos. The cannibalism was not directed only toward imposters hidden within the brood. Genuine descendants disappeared as well. The explanation lies in the limitations of available information. The father cannot identify every unrelated embryo individually, so he cannot remove only those eggs that fail to carry his genes. Instead, he responds to the overall likelihood that the brood contains too many offspring belonging to rivals. Once that uncertainty rises beyond a certain point, the expected return from continued parental investment begins to decline. The decision therefore follows the same biological arithmetic encountered throughout this unfolding story. The father is not attempting to punish another male or recognize each individual embryo. He is responding to probabilities shaped by evolutionary history. If too much of the brood may belong to someone else, preserving the nest becomes a less rewarding investment than reclaiming its stored energy and beginning again. Within that calculation, unrelated embryos and genuine descendants become inseparable, and the entire brood may vanish together beneath the same relentless logic. Life inside a fish nest depends upon something that cannot be seen. Every developing embryo draws dissolved oxygen from the surrounding water, using it to build tissues, power growing organs, and sustain the steady rhythm of development. At first, this demand remains modest. As more embryos grow together inside the same nest, however, their combined need rises continuously until the water flowing around them begins to struggle to keep pace. The balance becomes especially delicate when eggs are packed closely together. During periods of warm water, oxygen dissolves less readily into the sea. In sheltered places where currents slow, fresh water reaches the embryos less efficiently. Another challenge arrives before sunrise, after aquatic plants and algae have spent the entire night consuming dissolved oxygen through respiration without daylight to replenish surrounding waters through photosynthesis. Under these conditions, the embryos closest together begin competing for the same limited supply. Most nest-guarding fathers compensate by moving their fins almost constantly, pushing fresh water across the developing brood. Yet, not every species possesses this solution. The Boreopacifica damselfish, known scientifically as Stigastes leucostictus, inhabits coral reefs throughout the Caribbean Sea and the western Atlantic Ocean. Unlike several of the fathers already encountered, this species does not ventilate its eggs through continuous fanning. The concentration of dissolved oxygen within the nest, therefore, depends largely upon how many embryos occupy the available space. That dependence creates an unusual form of parental decision-making. Researchers studying Boreopacifica damselfish discovered that fathers became significantly more likely to consume eggs when dissolved oxygen levels declined. Hunger did not explain the pattern. Neither did brood size alone, nor uncertainty about ancestry. The behavior emerged because the physical environment surrounding the embryos had changed, altering the chances that every individual egg could complete development successfully. The consequences became clearer through experimental observation. A study published during 2002 in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B examined what happened after fathers removed part of the brood. The remaining embryos experienced improved development and greater survival than crowded broods left untouched. Fewer embryos meant lower total oxygen demand within the nest. Each surviving egg received a larger share of the available supply, allowing development to continue under conditions that might otherwise have proved fatal to the entire clutch. Another investigation, published during 2004 in Ecological Modeling, approached the same question through mathematical simulation rather than direct observation. Different reproductive strategies were compared under varying environmental conditions. Again, selective removal of some embryos consistently produced higher total survival than strategies attempting to preserve every egg regardless of oxygen availability. The calculations echoed what natural selection had already discovered through countless generations beneath the sea. Seen from this perspective, the father's behavior changes meaning once again. The consumed embryos are not simply exchanged for nourishment. Their removal alters the physical environment surrounding those that remain. Every egg eliminated reduces competition for dissolved oxygen, increasing the likelihood that neighboring embryos will survive the most demanding stages of development. Loss to part of the brood becomes protection for the remainder. This form of parental care possesses an unusual kind of precision. The father is not abandoning his offspring. He is managing the nest itself, responding to invisible changes in the chemistry of the surrounding water before those changes spread through the entire clutch. The sacrifice occurs because preserving every embryo would ultimately preserve none. Across the reef, this process unfolds without ceremony, guided by conditions no parent consciously measures. Yet the outcome reflects an elegant biological solution shaped through immense spans of evolutionary history. In the Bogrigori damselfish, consuming part of the brood is not the opposite of protecting it. It is the very mechanism through which protection succeeds, allowing the remaining embryos to continue drawing the breath that the crowded nest could no longer provide for all of them. A father can appear unchanged from one day to the next, remaining beside the same nest, sheltering the same developing brood beneath the same fragment of stone. Yet beneath that outward constancy, another process unfolds beyond ordinary observation. Deep within his body, chemical signals rise and fall, adjusting priorities that have been shaped through countless generations. The nest remains where it has always been, but the father himself is gradually becoming someone else. This transformation has been studied in the barred chin blenny, known scientifically as Rhabdoblennius nitidus, a small marine fish living along the coastal waters of Japan. During a breeding cycle, a successful male may receive as many as 2,500 eggs from several different females. Once spawning is complete, he assumes every responsibility. He remains within the nest for roughly 7 days, circulating water around the embryos, driving away intruders, removing damaged eggs, and maintaining conditions that allow healthy development to continue until hatching. At first glance, these behaviors seem governed entirely by the circumstances surrounding the nest. Food availability matters, brood size matters, oxygen conditions matter, confidence of paternity matters. Yet physiological research has revealed that another influence exists beneath all of these external pressures. The father's own endocrine system changes throughout the breeding period, altering the balance between parental care and reproductive opportunity. Investigations into the endocrinology of this species found that total filial cannibalism is closely associated with declining concentrations of a hormone called 11-ketotestosterone, the principal androgen found in teleost fishes. This hormone plays a central role in regulating male reproductive behavior, especially the intensity of courtship directed toward potential mates. While concentrations remain within an appropriate range, the father continues investing in the brood already under his protection. As those concentrations decline beyond a critical threshold, the balance begins shifting away from prolonged parental care. The remarkable consequence is that the transition can unfold with striking speed. A male that had recently devoted himself to defending and maintaining his clutch may suddenly consume the entire brood before returning to behaviors associated with attracting another female. From an outside perspective, the change appears abrupt. Internally, however, it reflects a biological state already moving toward a different reproductive objective. Seen through this lens, the consumption of the brood becomes something more complex than a response to immediate conditions alone. External circumstances may still influence the outcome, but they interact with an internal physiological landscape already determining how strongly parental behavior is expressed. The father is not simply weighing alternatives in the way a human might imagine deliberate choice. His nervous system and endocrine system are continuously reshaping the motivational forces acting upon him, strengthening one pattern of behavior while gradually weakening another. The same hormonal machinery that once encouraged nest construction, territorial defense, courtship, and the acceptance of eggs eventually contributes to ending that period of care. When the internal balance shifts sufficiently, Guarding no longer provides the greatest lifetime reproductive return. Natural selection has favored males capable of leaving an unproductive investment behind and re-entering the breeding population while additional opportunities still remain. Across many generations, this strategy produces more descendants than unwavering devotion to every clutch, regardless of changing conditions. A father that returns to courtship soon enough may fertilize many more eggs over the course of his life than one that continues protecting a brood whose future reproductive value has already fallen below its biological cost. Within the sheltered nest, nothing announces this transition. The surrounding water carries on as before, and the embryos remain where they were first placed. Yet inside the father's body, chemistry has altered the direction of his reproductive journey. The ending of parental care does not begin with a conscious rejection of the brood. It begins with molecules changing their concentration, redirecting behavior toward another season of reproduction, following a pattern that evolution has refined across immense stretches of time beneath the sea. Long before a brood reaches the moment of hatching, another current is already flowing beneath the life of the nest. Every egg represents an investment in the present, yet every breeding season also carries the possibility of another spawning event still waiting beyond the horizon. Evolution does not separate these possibilities. It weighs them together, balancing present offspring against future descendants with the same relentless consistency that shapes every other feature of life beneath the sea. This balance reveals another dimension of filial cannibalism, one that does not arise because the current brood has become worthless, but because the opportunity for another brood has become exceptionally valuable. In several nest-guarding fishes, reproduction is not a sequence of isolated events. It is a continuous cycle in which courtship, spawning, care, and renewed courtship overlap, each influencing the success of the next. Within that cycle, the timing of a male's parental commitment can alter his attractiveness to females still searching for a nesting partner. Researchers have discovered that females in multiple species often prefer males already guarding freshly deposited eggs. A new clutch serves as a reliable biological advertisement. It signals that the male has recently succeeded in attracting a mate, remains in strong physical condition, possesses a functioning nest, and has demonstrated parental behavior that another female may also benefit from. Rather than avoiding an occupied father, females frequently regard his existing brood as evidence that he is a worthwhile investment. An unexpected consequence follows from this preference. A male guarding embryos that are already approaching hatching may appear less desirable than one tending a recently established clutch. The older brood still demands attention, yet it provides a weaker signal of current reproductive activity. If that male consumes the existing eggs and quickly attracts another female, his nest once again contains the youthful brood that future females appear to favor. Mathematical modeling studies have explored how this strategy performs under different ecological conditions. Their results indicate that when females are abundant and opportunities for additional spawning remain high, the reproductive advantage of resetting the nest becomes progressively greater. Under these circumstances, sacrificing one brood may increase the father's lifetime production of descendants by allowing him to begin another cycle without delay. Natural selection evaluates success across an entire lifetime rather than within a single nesting attempt, and the calculations consistently favor whichever strategy leaves the greatest genetic legacy. Observations of the Cortez damselfish provide an especially revealing example. Females were found to deposit eggs more readily, with males already guarding embryos in the earliest stages of development. Remarkably, Those same developmental stages are also the ones males most frequently consume when filial cannibalism occurs. The preferences of both sexes, therefore, converge upon the same brief window, although each arrives there for entirely different evolutionary reasons. The result is an intricate feedback system. Females reward males, displaying newly established broods, because those nests advertise active reproduction and dependable care. Males, meanwhile, can increase the likelihood of attracting additional females by restoring that same appearance after eliminating an older clutch. Each generation reinforces the pressures acting upon the next, gradually refining behaviors on both sides until they become deeply embedded within the reproductive biology of the species. Viewed from within the nest alone, filial cannibalism appears to end a family before it has begun. Viewed across an entire breeding season, the same behavior can become the mechanism that keeps reproduction moving forward. The consumed brood provides nourishment, releases the father from prolonged care, and allows another sequence of courtship to begin while opportunities remain abundant. The ocean has therefore shaped a father whose success is measured not only by the young he protects today, but also by the generations he may produce tomorrow. In some species, consuming the brood does not interrupt reproduction. It renews it, transforming the conclusion of one investment into the beginning of the next through a cycle refined across immense expanses of evolutionary time. Some ideas arrive only after generations of careful observation. Others appear first as patterns of thought, waiting for the living world to reveal whether they are true. The story unfolding beneath the surface belongs to the second kind. Long before researchers documented fathers consuming their own broods across reefs, estuaries, and rocky shorelines, evolutionary theory had already outlined the conditions under which such behavior should emerge. In 1972, Harvard evolutionary biologist Robert Trivers published a landmark paper entitled Parental Investment and Sexual Selection. Within it, he gave formal shape to the concept of parental investment, defining it as any expenditure of time, energy, or risk that increases the survival of current offspring while reducing a parent's capacity to produce future descendants. That balance, expressed in a single principle, reached far beyond the species available for study at the time. It offered a framework capable of predicting behaviors that had not yet been widely documented. At the heart of the theory stood one essential prediction: natural selection would not favor parents that devoted themselves unconditionally to every brood they produced. Instead, it would favor parents that maximized their total reproductive success across an entire lifetime. A father that exhausted his reserves, protecting a brood with little chance of success, might never breed again. Another that abandoned an investment no longer offering sufficient return could recover, court another mate, and produce several additional broods before the breeding season came to an end. Across generations, the second strategy would leave more descendants. From this reasoning came another prediction, one especially relevant beneath the sea. Filial cannibalism should occur most often in species where fathers provide the majority of parental care. Every hour spent guarding eggs represents an hour unavailable for courtship. Every reserve of stored energy devoted to defending a nest cannot be spent attracting another mate. The greater the paternal investment, the greater the evolutionary pressure to abandon that investment whenever its expected return falls below the opportunities still remaining. The theory also anticipated that this behavior would be especially common among species capable of producing several broods during a single breeding season. Where repeated reproductive opportunities exist, preserving the ability to breed again becomes increasingly valuable. A father protecting only one clutch has little reason to think beyond it. A father capable of receiving several successive broods must constantly balance present commitment against future possibility. As decades passed, observations accumulated from laboratories and natural habitats across the world. Researchers measured clutch size, food availability, oxygen concentration, developmental stage, hormonal condition, mating opportunity, and uncertainty of paternity. Again and again, the results converged upon the same underlying principle. Fathers most often consumed their own offspring when continuing parental care threatened to reduce their overall lifetime reproductive success rather than increase it. Evidence gathered from more than 400 species ultimately confirmed the broad pattern envisioned by Trivers. Filial cannibalism occurs predominantly among species with paternal care. It is concentrated within animals capable of repeated breeding opportunities. Its frequency rises and falls in ways that closely match the predicted balance between current investment and future reproductive potential. Individual species differ in detail, yet the governing logic remains remarkably consistent across an extraordinary diversity of fishes. What emerges from this body of evidence is not an assortment of isolated curiosities, but a coherent biological system. Hunger, brood size, oxygen availability, reproductive opportunity, hormonal change, and uncertainty of parentage all become parts of the same calculation, because each influences the value of continuing parental care. They are separate pathways leading toward a shared evolutionary outcome. The mathematics guiding these fathers was never arbitrary. Long before researchers documented many of the behaviors now known in remarkable detail, evolutionary theory had already described the rules by which they should operate. Across immense spans of time, generation after generation has followed those same principles, not through conscious intention, but through natural selection, steadily refining which fathers left the greatest number of descendants beneath the sea. Not every danger arrives from beyond the nest. Some begin within it, hidden among the very offspring a father has spent days protecting. A brood can appear secure beneath its shelter of stone or shell, defended from hungry predators and sustained by attentive care, while an entirely different threat advances from egg to egg. It does not chase, bite, or strike. It grows, spreading through the clutch until the father's greatest danger is no longer outside the nest, but resting at its center. One of the most destructive enemies of developing fish embryos is water mold, especially members of the genus Saprolegnia. These organisms thrive in aquatic environments and readily colonize damaged or weakened eggs. Once established, delicate white filaments extend across neighboring embryos, forming a network that interrupts normal development and reduces the supply of dissolved oxygen reaching healthy eggs. Under favorable conditions, this expansion can move rapidly through an entire clutch, turning a small patch of infection into the loss of nearly every developing offspring. For a guarding father, speed becomes essential. Waiting for the infection to disappear naturally is not an option, because every passing moment increases the likelihood that healthy embryos will become exposed. Unlike larger animals capable of separating sick young from healthy ones, a nest-guarding fish cannot carry individual eggs elsewhere. Each embryo remains firmly attached within a crowded cluster where disease can pass directly from one surface to the next. Research published in Ecology and Evolution explored how common goby fathers responded when mold infected part of their brood. Investigators presented males with eggs that had previously been exposed to water mold alongside healthy eggs while carefully controlling for paternity. The fathers consistently consumed significantly more of the infected eggs than the uninfected ones. Because relatedness remained constant, the preference could not be explained by uncertainty over genetic parentage. Something else was guiding the father's behavior. The nutritional explanation also proved insufficient. Diseased eggs offer comparatively little energetic value. Infection damages the developing embryo and reduces the resources contained within it. If calories alone drove the behavior, healthy eggs would represent the richer reward. Yet the fathers repeatedly selected the infected embryos instead, removing them before the mold could spread farther through the nest. Seen from this perspective, filial cannibalism becomes an act of sanitation rather than simple feeding. The father is not harvesting nourishment from the weakest members of the brood. He is eliminating sources of infection before they threaten the embryos, still capable of successful development. Every diseased egg consumed creates a small break in the advancing front of the mold, reducing opportunities for additional spores and filaments to reach neighboring offspring. The biological outcome closely resembles disease management observed in many other forms of parental care. Across the animal kingdom, parents isolate, abandon, or remove infected young. When doing so increases the survival of healthy siblings. Nest-guarding fishes face the same challenge under very different physical constraints. Because the embryos remain attached together beneath a shelter on the seafloor, consumption becomes the fastest and most complete method of removing an infected egg before the surrounding clutch is compromised. The action appears severe when viewed one embryo at a time, yet natural selection measures its success across the entire brood. Losing a handful of infected eggs can preserve hundreds more that would otherwise succumb to the same expanding outbreak. The father sacrifices individuals to preserve the greater reproductive investment already entrusted to his care. Another layer of the ocean's logic emerges through this behavior. Hunger may trigger cannibalism. Oxygen limitation may trigger it. Hormonal change, uncertain paternity, and future mating opportunities may also shape the same outcome. Disease adds another pathway entirely, one unrelated to energy or reproduction, yet leading to the identical act. The father consumes part of his own brood because, within the crowded architecture of a fish nest, removal through consumption has become the most effective defense. Evolution could refine against an invisible enemy, spreading from one fragile embryo to the next. Patterns become difficult to dismiss once they appear again and again across lives that share almost nothing else. A fish resting above a coral ledge in warm tropical water has little in common with another guarding a nest along a cold coastal shelf. Their ancestors separated across immense stretches of evolutionary time. Their habitats, diets, colors, and courtship displays followed different paths. Yet when the demands of parenthood settle upon them, an astonishing similarity begins to emerge. Filial cannibalism has now been documented in more than 400 species of ray-finned fish distributed across more than 104 families. The behavior appears among gobies, blennies, sticklebacks, damselfish, dottybacks, sunfish, darters, cichlids, and many other groups occupying nearly every major marine and coastal environment. Some defend rocky nests washed by surf. Others breed among coral formations, sheltered estuaries, freshwater streams, or broad inland lakes. Despite these differences, the same behavior continues to surface with remarkable consistency. Its presence is not confined to a single style of parenting. Species in which fathers guard the eggs display it. Species in which mothers provide care also exhibit it. It is found in families where both parents remain with the brood together. The pattern extends beyond nests, attached to stone or vegetation. Even mouthbrooders, carrying developing offspring within the safety of the mouth itself, sometimes consume part of their own brood under particular conditions. The setting changes, yet the underlying logic persists. The breadth of this distribution carries an important implication. These lineages did not simply inherit the behavior from one distant ancestor and preserve it unchanged. Many are separated by evolutionary histories, spanning tens or even hundreds of millions of years. During those immense intervals, they accumulated different anatomies, different reproductive systems, and different ecological roles. The repeated appearance of filial cannibalism therefore represents independent evolutionary origins rather than a single ancient inheritance carried unchanged through time. Evolutionary biologists describe this pattern as convergent evolution. Separate branches of life's history encounter comparable challenges and arrive at comparable solutions despite traveling entirely different evolutionary roads. Wings evolved independently in birds, bats, and insects because flight repeatedly offered an advantage. Camera-like eyes emerged more than once because gathering light efficiently solved a universal problem. Filial cannibalism belongs within this same category. The repeated emergence of the behavior reveals that unrelated fishes confronted similar pressures and responded through strikingly similar strategies. Those pressures are themselves widespread. A parent possesses limited energy. Eggs demand continuous protection. Oxygen within a nest can become scarce. Disease can spread through closely packed embryos. Rival males may introduce uncertainty over genetic parentage. Future breeding opportunities remain available only for a limited time. None of these circumstances belongs to a single family of fish. They recur throughout aquatic environments generation after generation, making the same evolutionary calculations relevant across countless species. Because the problems remain consistent, natural selection repeatedly favors comparable responses. Different ancestors, separated by immense spans of geological history, discover that sacrificing part of a brood can preserve greater lifetime reproductive success than preserving every embryo regardless of circumstance. The details vary from one lineage to another, but the broader pattern remains recognizable. Independent histories repeatedly converge upon the same difficult solution. Viewed across this larger canvas, filial cannibalism no longer appears as an unusual curiosity confined to a handful of remarkable fishes. It becomes a recurring feature of parental care wherever particular biological conditions intersect. More than 400 species, spread across more than 104 families and separated by hundreds of millions of years, point toward the same conclusion. The ocean has presented the challenge of raising offspring again and again across deep time. Evolution has answered that challenge repeatedly, refining different parents in different worlds until each arrived, through its own history, at the same unsettling arithmetic. Until now, every example has unfolded around fathers standing watch above nests, weighing the future of eggs resting upon stone, shell, or coral. The next chapter unfolds within an entirely different kind of nursery, one carried wherever its parent swims. Instead of a guarded nest exposed to currents and predators, the brood exists inside a living mouth, sheltered behind closing jaws that remain occupied for days without relief. It is here that researchers encountered a discovery so unexpected that they later described it in the scientific literature as an accident rather than the goal of the investigation. Astastotilapia bertoni is a cichlid from Lake Tanganyika in eastern Africa, a species that has become one of the most closely examined fishes in behavioral biology. For decades, it has helped researchers explore hormones, social hierarchies, reproduction, and parental care. Because so much was already known about its life, it seemed an unlikely place for a fundamental surprise to remain hidden. Yet nature often reserves its most remarkable observations for places already believed to be familiar. After spawning, the female gathers every fertilized egg into her mouth. There, they remain through the earliest stages of development, protected from predators and environmental hazards that would threaten an exposed nest. As the embryos transform into tiny fry, they continue living within the same refuge. The brooding period lasts for approximately 2 weeks. Throughout that entire interval, the mother's mouth is occupied. She cannot open it freely to capture prey, and feeding effectively comes to a halt while she carries the next generation wherever she travels. This form of parental care demands an extraordinary physiological commitment. Stored energy accumulated before reproduction must sustain both the mother's own metabolism and the continual effort required to protect the developing brood. Every passing day increases the energetic cost. The young remain secure because the parent accepts an extended period without nourishment, exchanging immediate survival opportunities for the protection of offspring still too vulnerable to survive alone. Researchers from Central Michigan University and Michigan State University established controlled laboratory groups to study this remarkable maternal behavior. Their work focused upon ordinary patterns of brooding, observing how females cared for developing young under carefully monitored conditions. Then, an unexpected pattern began to emerge. Certain females were no longer carrying every fry they had originally collected. At first, the observations appeared confusing. The missing young had not escaped. They had not been released prematurely into the surrounding water. They had not simply vanished between observations. Continued monitoring gradually revealed the explanation. Some females were swallowing their own fry while continuing to brood the remaining offspring within the very same mouth. Care had not ended. It continued alongside selective consumption. The finding challenged long-standing expectations. Mouthbrooding had often been regarded as one of the most complete expressions of parental devotion among fishes because the offspring remained enclosed within the parent's own body space for protection. Discovering cannibalism within that same protective chamber forced researchers to reconsider assumptions about what parental care could include. The behavior could no longer be divided neatly into nurturing on one side and consumption on the other. Both processes could exist together within a single parent during the same brooding period. One image from the study captured this contradiction with remarkable clarity. Through the translucent tissue of a mother's lip, the eye of a developing fry pressed outward, plainly visible from outside her closed mouth. The photograph revealed both intimacy and vulnerability in a single frame. Hidden behind that delicate barrier, some young remained protected, while others had already disappeared into the same parent responsible for their safety. The observation itself answered only one mystery. It established beyond doubt that maternal mouthbrooding and filial cannibalism could occur together. It did not yet explain why a mother enduring weeks without food would preserve some offspring while consuming others, even as every remaining fry continued to find refuge within the same living shelter. The explanation did not emerge from observing behavior alone. It appeared only after researchers looked beneath movement and into chemistry itself, tracing invisible processes unfolding inside the mother's body while she continued carrying her brood. What they discovered expanded filial cannibalism beyond energy, hormones, disease, and reproductive timing into a realm measured at the level of individual cells. A study published in Biology Letters during November of 2022 by Jake Sawecki and Peter Dykstra examined maternal mouthbrooding in Astatotilapia bertoni from a physiological perspective. Mouthbrooding demands an extraordinary commitment For approximately 2 weeks, the female remains unable to feed normally, yet her body continues supporting every essential function required for survival. Muscles continue working, tissues repair themselves, the immune system remains active, and countless chemical reactions proceed without pause. None of those processes stop simply because food is unavailable. Normal metabolism inevitably produces reactive oxygen species, unstable molecules generated as cells convert stored energy into usable form. Under ordinary conditions, the body counters these compounds using antioxidants, preventing them from damaging deoxyribonucleic acid, proteins, and delicate cell membranes. During an extended fast, however, that protective balance becomes increasingly difficult to maintain. As antioxidants are gradually depleted, reactive oxygen species accumulate more rapidly than they can be neutralized, creating a condition known as oxidative stress. Across many forms of life, oxidative stress is associated with accelerated cellular aging, reduced tissue performance, and diminished future reproductive success. Rather than relying upon indirect clues, the researchers measured this condition directly. At several carefully planned stages during the brooding period, they analyzed liver tissue from females, allowing them to compare oxidative stress with observed parental behavior. A remarkably consistent relationship appeared. Mothers, showing higher levels of oxidative stress, also consumed greater numbers of their own fry, while continuing to brood those that remained. The pattern became even more revealing when the chemical composition of the mothers was examined after those feeding events. Females that had consumed more fry displayed greater antioxidant activity within their liver tissue. The relationship matched an elegant biological explanation. Developing fry contained dense concentrations of valuable biological compounds, including antioxidants accumulated during growth. While the mother remained unable to search for food beyond her own mouth, the offspring she already carried represented the only immediately available source capable of restoring those depleted reserves. The discovery transformed the meaning of the behavior. The consumed fry were not functioning merely as calories, replacing those lost through fasting. They supplied specific compounds that helped restore the mother's antioxidant defenses, reducing the damaging effects of oxidative stress at precisely the moment those defenses were under their greatest strain. The behavior, therefore, addressed a biochemical need rather than simple hunger. A further investigation, published during 2024 in Micropublication Biology, strengthened this interpretation. Researchers found that fry consumption influenced the relationship between antioxidant function and development of the reproductive organs, indicating that the physiological effects extended beyond immediate survival. The compounds obtained during brooding also prepared the mother's body for future reproductive cycles after the current brood had finally been released. Viewed together, the sequence forms a measurable biological loop. Oxidative stress gradually rises as fasting continues. Consumption of a portion of the brood increases. Antioxidant activity within the mother's body improves. Cellular balance becomes more stable, allowing both parent and remaining offspring to continue through the demanding final stages of brooding. Every step can be observed through measurable changes rather than speculation. Within that living nursery carried behind closed jaws, nourishment becomes medicine. The mother is not responding to ordinary appetite. She is compensating for a physiological deficit created by one of the most demanding forms of parental care known among fishes. The same brood she protects also contains the biochemical resources that preserve her capacity to complete the journey, release the surviving young, and one day begin the cycle again. Precision often reveals itself not through what an animal does, but through what it refuses to do. After the biochemical patterns of maternal mouthbrooding became visible, another detail emerged with equal importance. The mother was not consuming her entire brood. She was preserving most of it. Whatever mechanism guided the behavior was neither reckless nor uncontrolled. It operated within boundaries that remained remarkably consistent from one individual to another. Research indicates that mouth-brooding cichlid mothers may consume as much as 40% of their own eggs, or developing fry during the brooding period. At first glance, that fraction appears astonishingly large, yet it carries another message hidden within it. Even at the upper end of observed consumption, the greater share of the brood remains alive. More than 60% typically survives the demanding weeks spent within the mother's mouth before entering the surrounding water as free-swimming young. The outcome is neither complete sacrifice nor complete preservation. It is a carefully balanced middle ground. That balance transforms the meaning of the behavior. An indiscriminate response driven by overwhelming hunger would be expected to continue until every available source of nourishment had disappeared. Instead, consumption stops while a substantial brood still remains. The mother's physiology appears to regulate the exchange, preserving enough offspring to secure reproductive success while obtaining sufficient biological resources to complete one of the most energetically expensive forms of parental care known among fishes. The process resembles a biological transaction rather than a collapse of maternal instinct. Every fry retained within the mouth represents future reproductive success. Every fry consumed contributes to maintaining the mother's capacity to protect those that remain. The exchange is governed not by excess, but by restraint. Survival depends upon finding a balance where both parent and offspring can endure the final stages of brooding together. In that respect, the pattern closely mirrors the partial filial cannibalism already observed among nest-guarding fathers. The details differ, yet the underlying principle remains strikingly similar. Neither parent abandons the brood, neither consumes offspring without limit. Instead, each continually adjusts investment according to changing biological conditions. The brood itself becomes something dynamic, capable of being managed in response to the parent's physiological state, while preserving the greatest achievable number of surviving descendants. Another aspect of the discovery makes this balance even more remarkable. Dr. Peter Dijkstra, one of the authors of the study published during 2022, noted that his research group had spent well over a decade working with these fishes. Across hundreds of hours of careful observation, they had never witnessed females ejecting eggs or fry from the mouth in a manner suggesting accidental loss. From the outside, maternal care appeared uninterrupted and complete. Only careful physiological investigation revealed that selective consumption had been occurring within the enclosed brooding chamber all along. That realization carries an important lesson extending beyond a single species. Some of the most sophisticated biological behaviors cannot be recognized through observation alone. They remain concealed inside organs, tissues, and chemical pathways, leaving almost no outward sign until the appropriate measurements uncover them. Entire strategies of parental care may operate beneath the visible surface for generations before becoming apparent to science. Within the enclosed space of the mother's mouth, every surviving fry reflects a calculation performed not through conscious reasoning, but through physiology refined across immense spans of evolutionary time. The number consumed changes with the mother's condition, while the number preserved remains sufficient to continue the lineage. A behavior overlooked, despite years of dedicated observation, was never absent. It was unfolding continuously, regulated with extraordinary precision by biological systems working beyond the limits of ordinary sight. Patterns become unmistakable when they emerge from lives that have never shared the same history. Across reefs washed by tropical currents, along temperate coastlines, within sheltered estuaries, and among rocky shorelines separated by immense distances, parents encounter different waters, different predators, and different challenges. Yet beneath those differences, evolution continues arriving at a remarkably familiar destination. The path changes from species to species, but the destination remains almost unchanged. The goby father consumes part of a brood when the energetic cost of guarding exceeds the value of preserving every egg. The three-spined stickleback transforms developing offspring into a reserve of nourishment that can sustain continued parental care when outside food becomes scarce. A damselfish maintains a measurable background level of filial cannibalism even when no obvious crisis has appeared. Another damselfish removes embryos because reducing their number allows the remaining eggs to receive enough oxygen to continue developing. A barred chin blenny undergoes an internal hormonal transition that redirects its biology from caring for a brood toward attracting another mate. A mouthbrooding cichlid mother consumes part of her own developing young to replenish antioxidant reserves while enduring weeks without feeding. None of these animals reaches the same outcome through identical pathways. Their physiology differs, their habitats differ, their reproductive systems differ, even the immediate triggers differ. Energy shortage, oxygen limitation, hormonal change, disease prevention, reproductive opportunity, and biochemical depletion all begin from separate circumstances. Even so, every route converges upon a common biological response. A parent consumes part of its own offspring because doing so ultimately preserves greater reproductive success across an entire lifetime. The remarkable feature is not merely that this behavior appears repeatedly. It is that these lineages stand separated by evolutionary distances spanning tens to hundreds of millions of years. Their shared ancestors lived so far in the past that none could have passed this precise strategy directly to every descendant. Each lineage encountered its own environmental pressures. Each lineage solved those pressures independently. The resemblance is therefore not inheritance, it is repetition. Evolutionary biology describes this pattern as convergent evolution. Whenever unrelated organisms repeatedly develop comparable solutions under comparable selective pressures, convergence reveals that nature has discovered an answer with exceptional reliability. The solution does not emerge because history insists upon it. It emerges because similar problems repeatedly reward similar outcomes. Every independent appearance strengthens the evidence that the underlying pressures remain consistent across changing environments and immense stretches of geological time. Those pressures are themselves surprisingly ordinary. Parental care demands energy that cannot be spent elsewhere. Every parent possesses only finite biological reserves. Broods differ in their likelihood of surviving to maturity. Many species receive repeated opportunities to reproduce throughout a breeding season or across many seasons. Whenever these conditions exist together, each decision about present investment influences future reproductive success. Natural selection, therefore, favors mechanisms that balance current offspring against future descendants rather than preserving every brood at any cost. These circumstances are not confined to a handful of unusual fishes. They define the reproductive lives of hundreds of species inhabiting coral reefs, coastal shallows, rocky shorelines, sandy seabeds, river mouths, and freshwater lakes. Wherever parental care intersects with limited resources and uncertain survival, similar calculations emerge through biology itself, expressed not as conscious thought, but as inherited physiology, refined across countless generations. Seen from that broader perspective, filial cannibalism ceases to resemble an evolutionary curiosity. It becomes one of the ocean's most dependable solutions to a recurring problem. The experiment has unfolded independently again and again across immense spans of time, under changing climates and shifting seas, within lineages that never shared the same recent ancestry. Each repetition echoes the last with remarkable consistency. Whenever the balance between present sacrifice and future success reaches the same point, evolution arrives at the same answer, and the ocean preserves the parents whose biology allows that difficult calculation to be made. Long before scientists began measuring hormones, counting eggs, or tracing family relationships with genetic tools, another process had already been unfolding beneath the surface of the water. Every adjustment made by one parent gradually invited an adjustment from the other. Across immense spans of evolutionary time, reproduction became less like a fixed behavior and more like an ongoing exchange, each generation refining the decisions inherited from the last. The countermeasures displayed by females across many of these species are remarkable not merely because they exist, but because of what they reveal about the age of the conflict itself. Evolution does not produce intricate behavioral responses to events that occur only occasionally. For a trait to become widespread, the selective pressure driving it must remain consistent across countless generations. Every female strategy documented by researchers, therefore, serves as indirect evidence that paternal filial cannibalism has persisted for an extraordinarily long time. Consider the timing of egg deposition. In several species, females do not place their eggs into a nest at random. They assess the developmental stage of the clutch already present before deciding whether to spawn. That preference exists because the developmental age of existing eggs changes the probability that newly deposited eggs will survive. Such precision could not arise unless the relationship between brood age and paternal behavior remained dependable across evolutionary history, allowing natural selection to reward females that recognize the pattern. Another layer of assessment emerges through the condition of the guarding male himself. Females in several species appear capable of evaluating whether a prospective mate possesses sufficient physical reserves to complete parental care successfully. A healthy male represents more than strong genetics. His condition also provides information about the likelihood that he will continue guarding rather than consuming the brood. Over immense spans of time, females that interpreted these signals more accurately left more surviving descendants, gradually strengthening the behavior within later generations. These adaptations are therefore not isolated curiosities. They are deeply embedded features of reproductive biology, shaped by repeated interactions between opposing evolutionary interests. Every improvement in a father's ability to evaluate the value of his brood creates pressure favoring females that can anticipate those evaluations. Every successful female strategy, in turn, creates pressure favoring fathers that refine their own decisions with even greater precision. Neither side remains unchanged because neither side exists outside the influence of the other. Evolutionary biologists describe this process as coevolution, a continuing exchange in which each participant alters the selective landscape experienced by the other. The father does not evolve in isolation. The mother does not evolve in isolation. Their reproductive strategies become linked across geological time, each influencing the future direction of the other's biology. What appears to be conflict at the level of an individual nest becomes, across millions of years, a remarkably productive engine for adaptation. Within that continuing exchange, reproduction never ceases. Eggs continue to hatch, parents continue to guard, new generations continue replacing the old. The opposing pressures do not dismantle the reproductive system. Instead, they refine it, producing increasingly accurate assessments, increasingly selective mate choice, and increasingly effective allocation of limited biological resources. Every successful generation carries forward behaviors shaped by countless previous negotiations between investment and survival. Seen from this wider perspective, the tension between paternal cannibalism and maternal counter-strategy no longer resembles a flaw within the biology of these fishes. It becomes one of the mechanisms through which natural selection sharpens parental care itself. The ocean has not removed disagreement from reproduction. It has preserved it because that continuing pressure encourages greater precision on both sides, gradually producing parents whose decisions align ever more closely with the changing demands of their environment. Across millions of years, that relentless dialogue has remained one of the most enduring forces shaping life beneath the surface, leaving behind not perfect harmony, but an ever more finely balanced partnership between competing evolutionary interests. Across every story carried through these waters, a familiar rhythm has emerged. Parents weigh one possibility against another through mechanisms shaped by evolution itself. The value of a brood shifts with available energy, changing oxygen, uncertain parentage, disease, future breeding opportunities, or the chemistry flowing through a parent's own body. Again and again, survival has favored individuals capable of adjusting their investment when circumstances demand it. The pattern has appeared with remarkable consistency until it almost seems like an unbreakable rule. Then the pattern ends. Far below the reach of sunlight, in a realm where food drifts only occasionally through the darkness, another parent followed an entirely different path. No measurable threshold redirected her behavior. No exchange between present offspring and future reproduction became visible. No reversal arrived. She remained exactly where she had begun. The animal was Graneledone boreopacifica, a deep-sea octopus inhabiting the northeastern Pacific Ocean. During April of 2007, researchers from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute explored the Monterey Submarine Canyon using a remotely operated vehicle. At a depth of 1,397 meters, that is nearly 4,583 feet, they encountered a solitary female moving slowly across the sea floor before settling upon a rocky outcrop. When the researchers returned 38 days later, they found her again. She had wrapped her arms around a cluster of approximately 160 eggs, each shaped like a small tear and comparable in size to an olive. The eggs hung beneath the rock, while her body formed a living shelter above them. From that moment onward, her entire existence became centered upon the developing brood. The research team continued visiting the same location over the following years. Expedition after expedition reached the rocky ledge, and every observation revealed the same extraordinary scene. They returned a total of 17 additional times across roughly 4.5 years. Every visit ended with the female still embracing her eggs, still occupying the same narrow refuge in water hovering only a few degrees above freezing. Food occasionally drifted close enough to seize. Crabs wandered within reach. Shrimp passed near her waiting arms. She ignored them all. Unlike the fishes encountered earlier, she never converted her offspring into nourishment, never abandoned the brood to search for prey, and never interrupted the care that had become the sole purpose of her remaining life. Instead, Her arms gently circulated fresh water across the eggs without interruption. Fine particles settling from above were removed before they could accumulate upon the developing embryos. Predators approaching the nest encountered a parent that refused to retreat. Every movement she performed served the same single objective: preserving conditions that allowed the embryos to continue developing during one of the longest known brooding periods ever documented for any animal. The cost unfolded gradually within her own body. Month after month without feeding forced her to rely entirely upon stored reserves accumulated before reproduction began. Muscle tissue diminished. Her condition steadily declined. The energy sustaining her care no longer arrived from the surrounding environment, but from her own flesh, converted little by little into the final investment she could make. Eventually, the researchers returned once more. The rocky ledge looked different. The eggs had hatched, leaving only empty attachment points where they had once been suspended beneath the stone. The female herself had disappeared. Her life had reached its natural conclusion only after the young had departed into the surrounding depths. In an ocean filled with parents whose biology sometimes demands sacrifice of the brood to preserve themselves, this solitary octopus revealed another possibility entirely. She surrendered herself completely, leaving nothing behind except the next generation drifting into the vast darkness. Some discoveries reshape an entire field, not because they overturn established ideas, but because they stretch the limits of what life itself appears capable of enduring. The female deep-sea octopus resting upon her rocky refuge had already challenged every expectation surrounding parental devotion. Continued observation revealed that her commitment extended far beyond even the most generous predictions, transforming an unusual sighting into one of the most extraordinary records in all of biology. The complete duration of her vigil was confirmed in a paper published during 2014 by Bruce Robison, Brad Seibel, and Jeffrey Drazen. From the day she was first observed attending her eggs until the final documented stage before hatching, the brooding period lasted 53 months, equal to 4 years and 5 months. No other known animal has ever been documented maintaining uninterrupted parental care for such an extended period. Even among octopuses, the difference was astonishing. The previous record belonged to a captive Arctic octopus whose brooding period lasted 14 months. That remarkable achievement had already demonstrated unusual endurance within the group. The female resting within the Monterey submarine canyon exceeded that duration by nearly 3 additional years, establishing a new benchmark that expanded scientific understanding of the biological limits of maternal care. Comparisons across the broader animal kingdom only deepen the significance of the record. Elephants carry developing young for approximately 22 months before birth. Frilled sharks retain developing embryos for roughly 42 months. Alpine salamanders nurture their offspring internally for approximately 48 months. Each of these examples represents an extraordinary investment in reproduction, yet all involve young developing within the parent's body, protected through internal gestation. The octopus accomplished something fundamentally different. Her eggs remained exposed to the surrounding seawater while she continuously guarded, cleaned, and ventilated them without feeding throughout the entire period. The certainty of these observations rested upon careful documentation rather than assumption. Researchers confirmed that every visit involved the same individual by identifying distinctive scars and markings upon her body. Across a total of 18 encounters, the evidence remained consistent. The same female occupied the same rocky ledge, maintaining the same brood through season after season, while her physical condition gradually declined before the cameras observing her. That decline unfolded with remarkable clarity. A healthy octopus normally transforms its appearance from moment to moment, altering both color and skin texture in response to changing circumstances. During the prolonged vigil, those abilities steadily faded. Her body became increasingly pale and uniform. Muscle mass diminished until her frame appeared noticeably thinner than during the earliest observations. The powerful suckers lining her arms gradually lost their ability to cling firmly to the rock beneath her. Her large, sophisticated eyes, ordinarily alert and constantly moving, eventually appeared clouded and fixed. The environment itself contributed to her survival, though it could never remove the cost. At a depth of 1,397 meters, that is nearly 4,583 feet, the surrounding water remained close to 3 degrees Celsius, or 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Such low temperatures slowed her metabolism, reducing the speed at which stored energy was consumed. Her almost complete lack of movement further conserved precious reserves. Every unnecessary action disappeared, leaving only the gentle circulation of water across the eggs and the persistent embrace of protective arms. Even under those favorable conditions, the balance could not last forever. Energy continued leaving her body while nothing replaced it. Every passing month reduced the reserves accumulated before reproduction began. The eggs, meanwhile, developed at their own measured pace until they finally emerged as fully formed hatchlings prepared to hunt independently from the moment they entered the surrounding water. By the time researchers returned again, the mother had vanished. Her task had ended only after the last obligation to her offspring had been fulfilled, leaving behind one of the longest and most complete acts of parental care ever witnessed on Earth. The answer to her extraordinary endurance was never found in determination alone. Hidden within her body was a structure no larger than a small organ between her eyes, one that quietly directed the final chapter of her life with remarkable precision. The force that kept her wrapped around her developing young while food drifted within reach was the optic gland, an organ that transformed ordinary maternal care into one of the most complete biological commitments ever recorded. The optic glands of an octopus occupy a position between the eyes and perform a role broadly comparable to that of the pituitary gland in vertebrate animals. During most of a female's life, they participate in regulating ordinary physiological processes. After reproduction, however, those same glands undergo a profound shift. Egg laying does not merely begin the brooding period. It also activates an entirely different biological state, one dedicated almost exclusively to the survival of the next generation. Scientists from the University of Chicago examined the signaling pathways active within brooding female octopuses and discovered that the optic gland becomes the center of an extensive network of physiological changes. Multiple biochemical pathways become active after reproduction, each contributing to a different aspect of the mother's transformation. Feeding behavior is strongly suppressed. Steroid hormone activity changes dramatically. At the same time, processes associated with cellular aging begin accelerating throughout her body. Rather than preserving her own tissues, her physiology gradually redirects itself toward sustaining the eggs while accepting the progressive decline of the parent. The sequence unfolds with extraordinary coordination. Hunger, ordinarily among the strongest biological drives in any animal, weakens despite the continual depletion of energy reserves. The body continues maintaining circulation, respiration, tissue repair, and protection of the developing eggs even as stored nutrients steadily disappear. Cellular deterioration advances alongside parental care, not as an unfortunate side effect, but as part of the same carefully regulated program. Every stage appears synchronized with the prolonged development of the offspring resting beneath her arms. The importance of the optic gland became unmistakable through laboratory experiments performed with brooding females. Researchers surgically removed the glands while the mothers were still caring for their eggs. The response was immediate and unmistakable. Females that had refused available prey resumed feeding. Their normal patterns of movement returned. Most significantly, they abandoned the eggs they had previously guarded without interruption. The remarkable vigil ended almost as soon as the biological command center responsible for maintaining it disappeared. These observations transformed scientific understanding of octopus motherhood. The prolonged fast, the unwavering attendance, and the gradual collapse of the body were not maintained through conscious restraint in any human sense. They emerged from a biological program initiated when reproduction began. The optic gland acted as the engine sustaining that program, coordinating hormonal signals and cellular processes until the developmental needs of the offspring had been fulfilled. Once the gland's influence ended, the behavior ended with it. By the conclusion of those 53 months, equal to 4 years and 5 months, the hatchlings emerging from their protective capsules were unlike the tiny larvae produced by many shallow water octopus species. They entered the surrounding sea as large, fully developed young already equipped to hunt for themselves. The prolonged period of oxygenation, protection, and uninterrupted care in water measuring approximately 3 degrees Celsius or 37 degrees Fahrenheit had provided sufficient time for complete development before release into the deep Pacific. Within that sequence lies one of the most remarkable examples of biological programming ever documented. The same physiological instructions that compelled the mother to remain with her eggs also guided the gradual dismantling of her own body. Her offspring received every available resource until the moment they no longer required her protection. The final act was never separated from the first. Both had been written into the same living system from the instant the eggs were laid, carried forward by the small optic gland until its work, and hers, reached their natural conclusion. At first glance, the gulf between these two parents appears impossible to bridge. One consumes part of a brood and soon returns to reproduction. The other remains beside a single clutch until her own life reaches its end. Their actions seem to stand at opposite ends of parental behavior, yet beneath the surface, they are guided by the same evolutionary principle. The difference is not the goal. The difference is the set of biological conditions under which that goal must be achieved. The father goby lives within a life history built around repeated opportunities to reproduce. He belongs to a strategy known as iteroparity, in which breeding occurs many times across successive seasons whenever favorable conditions return. A nest that fails today does not necessarily erase future success. Energy preserved now may support another courtship, another spawning event, and another generation only weeks later. Within such a system, sacrificing a brood whose prospects have fallen below a critical threshold can increase the total number of descendants produced across an entire lifetime. The deep-sea octopus follows a profoundly different path. Graneledone boreopacifica reproduces only once during her entire existence. This strategy is known as semelparity. Her body prepares for a single reproductive effort, and everything that follows is directed toward that solitary investment. There is no reserve breeding season waiting beyond the horizon. There is no opportunity to recover strength for another clutch. If the developing young beneath her arms are lost, there will never be another attempt because her own biology offers no second beginning. Viewed through the framework of parental investment theory, neither parent behaves irrationally. Both are maximizing lifetime reproductive success, the same principle that has quietly shaped every example encountered throughout this journey. For the goby, future reproduction remains available, making energy a resource that must be guarded and allocated across many breeding opportunities. For the octopus, future reproduction has already vanished the moment the eggs are laid. Every remaining reserve inside her body belongs to the brood she already carries. The mathematics therefore changes without changing the underlying objective. In the goby, conserving energy for future offspring increases total reproductive success. In the octopus, conserving energy for herself would reduce total reproductive success because there will never be another clutch to receive it. The same evolutionary calculation produces entirely different behaviors because one variable has changed. Opportunity exists for one parent and disappears completely for the other. This contrast reveals something remarkably consistent about the living world. Evolution does not reward sacrifice for its own sake, nor does it reward efficiency without context. Instead, natural selection favors whichever pattern leaves behind the greatest number of surviving descendants over the course of an individual's entire reproductive life. Sometimes that outcome is achieved through flexibility, recovery, and another breeding attempt. At other times, it is achieved through complete commitment until every remaining resource has been transferred into the next generation. The goby therefore remains responsive, adjusting his investment as conditions change around the nest. The octopus remains unwavering because changing course offers no biological advantage. One parent protects future opportunities by accepting present loss. The other protects the present because no future opportunity exists. Each follows a path perfectly matched to the structure of its own life history. Seen together, these stories no longer contradict one another. They complete one another. Across shallow coastal nests and the cold darkness of the deep Pacific, the ocean has arrived at two very different expressions of the same enduring rule. Leave behind as many surviving descendants as your biology allows. Whether that requires letting go or holding on until nothing remains depends not upon compassion or cruelty, but upon the life history written into each species long before the first brood ever appeared, long before anyone observed these behaviors through cameras, field notes, or laboratory experiments. The evidence had already been preserved inside the animals themselves. It was written into the choices made by female fish, repeated generation after generation, until those choices became as dependable as the tides. Every carefully timed spawning event, every selective approach to a nesting male, and every subtle assessment of his condition became another page in a history that stretched far beyond any human record. The remarkable sophistication of these female strategies reveals something that extends well beyond behavior alone. It reveals time. Evolution does not produce finely tuned responses to fleeting events. A behavior capable of reshaping reproduction across an entire species must remain reliable through countless generations before natural selection can refine a matching response. Every countermeasure carried by female damselfish, gobies, and sticklebacks therefore serves as evidence that the male behaviors they address have existed long enough to leave an enduring mark upon the evolutionary history of both sexes. A female cannot evolve the ability to recognize a dependable signal unless that signal has remained dependable across vast spans of time. If a male's tendency to consume part of his brood, appeared only rarely or unpredictably, there would be little advantage in developing ways to anticipate it. Yet females repeatedly evaluate nesting conditions, distribute reproductive investment among different partners, and adjust the timing of egg laying with remarkable consistency. Such precision could emerge only because the pressures shaping it were equally persistent. The result is a pair of evolutionary stories unfolding together rather than separately. Male behavior influences female behavior, while female behavior reshapes the selective pressures acting upon males. Across innumerable generations, each refinement on one side encourages another refinement on the other. Neither sex remains unchanged because each continually responds to the adaptations emerging in its partner. What appears today as an intricate reproductive system is the accumulated outcome of an exceptionally long biological conversation. That conversation almost certainly reaches back to the earliest origins of nest guarding among fishes. Once parental care evolved, difficult decisions about energy, survival, and reproductive investment inevitably followed. A parent protecting eggs gained advantages unavailable to species that abandoned their offspring immediately, yet protection also created costs. Those costs open the possibility that consuming part of a brood could sometimes preserve greater reproductive success than protecting every individual. As soon as that possibility became consistent, females capable of reducing the associated risk gained advantages of their own. From that point onward, both strategies advanced together. Seen from this perspective, filial cannibalism no longer resembles an unexpected flaw, interrupting an otherwise harmonious system. Instead, it appears as one component of an integrated reproductive framework. The parental behavior, the selective consumption of offspring, and the female responses to that consumption are not independent features assembled by chance. Each exists because the others already existed. Together they create a dynamic balance that has endured across immense spans of evolutionary history. This realization changes the meaning of the conflict itself. The interaction between protective mothers and calculating fathers is not evidence that reproduction has broken down. It demonstrates that reproduction has become increasingly refined through continual adjustment. Every successful female strategy encourages greater precision in male decision-making. Every successful male strategy favors females capable of recognizing and responding to it. The relationship remains competitive in one sense, yet cooperative in another, because both sides ultimately contribute to the production of surviving descendants. The ocean, therefore, did not first invent devoted parental care and later discover that cannibalism had somehow intruded upon it. From the beginning, both processes became intertwined wherever environmental conditions rewarded them. Layer upon layer of female assessment accumulated beside layer upon layer of male calculation until the entire reproductive ecology of these fishes came to depend upon both. Across hundreds of millions of years, natural selection preserved not one behavior, but an integrated system in which conflict itself became one of the forces shaping more effective parents. There is a familiar habit in the way people observe the natural world. Faced with a devoted guardian or a parent consuming part of its own brood, the mind instinctively reaches for human language. One animal appears compassionate, another appears heartless, while a third seems capable of extraordinary devotion. Yet these impressions belong more to the observer than to the lives unfolding beneath the water, where another kind of logic has been shaping behavior across spans of time almost beyond imagination. The idea of instinct offers a different perspective, one that does not diminish these remarkable acts, but places them within the deeper architecture of biology. Instinct is not an emotion replacing thought, nor is it an invisible command whispered into an animal's mind. It is the expression of countless generations of natural selection, preserving patterns that repeatedly increased the number of surviving descendants until those patterns became woven into the ordinary functioning of the body itself. The father goby does not arrive at his nest and conduct an internal debate over the fate of his eggs. His condition is continually monitored through signals flowing within his own body. Energy reserves decline. The effort required to guard the brood changes as conditions around the nest shift, hormone concentrations fluctuate. Chemical signals released by developing eggs provide additional information about their condition and value. Eventually, these influences cross a biological threshold and behavior changes. The action appears sudden, yet beneath the surface, it is the outcome of many interacting processes that have been unfolding long before the first egg disappears. The mouthbrooding cichlid follows a pathway equally precise. As the long fast continues, ordinary cellular activity keeps generating reactive oxygen species as an unavoidable consequence of metabolism. Protective antioxidant reserves gradually diminish, while oxidative stress rises. At a certain point, another biological sequence begins. Some of the developing fry are consumed, antioxidant compounds enter the mother's body, and the biochemical imbalance eases. The adjustment is neither punishment nor surrender. It is a feedback system, restoring conditions that allow both the surviving offspring and their parent to reach the end of the brooding period together. Far below the reach of sunlight, the deep-sea octopus completes the same principle through an entirely different mechanism. Once her eggs are laid, the optic gland alters the chemistry governing the rest of her body. Feeding ceases. The vigilance surrounding the brood continues without interruption. Cellular aging advances according to a sequence already established within her physiology. The lengthy watch beside the rocky shelter does not continue because she repeatedly renews a conscious commitment. The biological program responsible for guarding the eggs remains active until the hatchlings emerge, after which the mother's own life reaches its natural conclusion. Seen together, these stories reveal that instinct is less like an impulse and more like an ancient design preserved within living tissue. Every movement of a fin across a nest, every current directed over fragile eggs, every adjustment in reproductive investment, and every prolonged vigil emerges from biological systems refined across evolutionary history. Individual animals express these patterns, yet none of them invents the patterns anew. This understanding does not diminish the reality of parental care. The nest remains protected. The eggs continue developing beneath attentive guardians. The hatchlings enter the world because someone remained beside them through danger, exhaustion, or deprivation. Those events occur in the physical world regardless of whether the forces producing them arise from conscious reflection or inherited biological programs. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson carried through all these different lives. What appears from one perspective as affection, from another as calculation, and from another still as unwavering devotion may simply be different ways of describing the same enduring process. Across immense stretches of evolutionary time, natural selection has written extraordinarily intricate instructions into living bodies, and every devoted parent, every calculated sacrifice, and every determined vigil becomes another expression of that ancient program continuing its work. At first glance, a nest guarded beneath the water appears to represent perfect cooperation. A female deposits her eggs. A male remains behind to defend them from predators, circulate fresh water across their surface, and keep the developing embryos alive. For a brief period, their interests seem inseparable, united in the creation of a new generation. Yet beneath that shared beginning, lies a tension that has existed for as long as sexual reproduction itself, one that becomes visible only when circumstances begin to change. The father guarding the nest is not simply protecting offspring, he is also protecting his own future as a reproducing individual. Every hour spent without feeding, every encounter with a predator, and every reserve of energy devoted to the current brood alters his prospects for the breeding attempts still ahead. In species capable of reproducing repeatedly throughout life, those future opportunities carry genuine evolutionary value. Preserving enough strength to survive and reproduce again can ultimately leave more descendants than exhausting every resource on a single clutch. The female who produced those eggs approaches the same nest from a different biological position. She invested considerable energy in producing the clutch, selecting a suitable partner, and depositing her eggs within his territory. Each egg already represents an investment that cannot be recovered. From her perspective, the greatest reproductive return comes from seeing every one of those offspring survive and enter the next stage of life. The brood before her is not merely one opportunity among many. It is a substantial portion of the reproductive effort she has already completed. For a time, these interests overlap almost perfectly. Both parents benefit when the eggs remain healthy, well oxygenated, and protected from predators. The partnership appears seamless because the goals of both individuals point toward the same outcome, yet biology does not guarantee that this alignment will last. As conditions shift, the balance changes with them. If the energetic cost of guarding rises beyond the value of continuing, the father's physiological calculations may eventually favor consuming part or all of the brood in order to preserve future reproductive success. At that moment, the interests of the two parents separate. This divergence is recognized within evolutionary biology as sexual conflict. Despite the name, it does not imply hostility in the ordinary sense, nor does it describe a breakdown of reproduction. Instead, it reflects the simple reality that two genetically distinct individuals cooperate to produce offspring while still possessing partially independent evolutionary interests. They share many goals, yet they do not share every optimal outcome. Natural selection therefore shapes each parent to maximize reproductive success according to the circumstances affecting that individual. The nesting fishes explored throughout this story make this principle unusually visible because the consequences unfold in unmistakable ways. The female's reproductive investment rests within the nest before the male. If his biological state continues to favor protection, the eggs develop toward hatching. If the balance shifts toward consumption, those same eggs become nourishment that may improve his chances of reproducing again. The transition between those possibilities can occur with remarkable speed because the underlying calculations are rooted in physiology rather than intention. Female countermeasures emerged across immense stretches of evolutionary time precisely because this conflict remained consistent enough to influence survival and reproduction. By evaluating a male's condition, distributing eggs among multiple nests, or adjusting the timing of spawning, females respond to selective pressures created by the same biological forces influencing males. Neither side exists independently. Each continually shapes the evolutionary path of the other. Seen in this light, the fish nests scattered across rivers, reefs, lakes, and coastal shallows become more than places where offspring develop. They become living demonstrations of one of biology's deepest principles. Cooperation and conflict exist together within the same reproductive system, not as contradictions, but as complementary forces. The parents build the nest together, yet natural selection continues, refining each of their interests even after the eggs have been laid, revealing with remarkable clarity the enduring balance between shared purpose and individual reproductive success. There is an unusual symmetry that emerges only after all of these lives are viewed together. The most striking feature is not that some parents consume their own offspring. It is that the capacity for extraordinary care and the capacity for extraordinary restraint occupy the very same body. They are not opposing forces, struggling for dominance. They are neighboring expressions of one biological system, each waiting for conditions that call it into action. The father goby embodies this balance with remarkable clarity. He prepares a nesting site before a single egg is laid. He courts a mate, cleans the surface where the embryos will develop, and remains beside the clutch as water moves endlessly across their delicate membranes. He drives away intruders many times his own size, spending energy that cannot be recovered while his opportunities to feed diminish with every passing day. None of these acts is separate from the possibility that he may later consume part of the same brood. Both outcomes arise from the same physiological machinery, responding to changing information about energy reserves, brood value, and future reproductive success. The transition is not a reversal of purpose. It is an adjustment within the same purpose. The mouth-brooding cichlid reveals the same principle through an even more intimate form of care. Once the eggs have been fertilized, they disappear into the mother's mouth, where they remain protected throughout their earliest development. During those weeks, she cannot feed, even as her own tissues continue consuming stored energy to sustain ordinary metabolism. Every movement, every breath, and every moment of protection carries a measurable biological cost. When oxidative stress eventually rises beyond what her diminishing reserves can support, consuming some of the fry restores compounds her body cannot obtain elsewhere. The remaining young continue developing within the same protective chamber. Care and consumption occupy the same place, guided by the same underlying objective. Far below the reach of daylight, the deep-sea octopus completes the pattern in a different direction. Her biology permits only one reproductive attempt, making every surviving hatchling immeasurably valuable. The physiological program governing her optic gland therefore channels every remaining resource toward that single brood. Feeding stops. Her body gradually breaks itself down while she continues tending the eggs. Nothing about this prolonged vigil contradicts the strategies seen in the fishes. It reflects the same evolutionary principle, expressed under different circumstances, where preserving future reproductive opportunities no longer has any biological meaning because none remain. Seen together, these parents do not represent competing philosophies of reproduction. They illustrate a single framework adapting itself to different lives. Where repeated breeding remains possible, conserving energy for future offspring may increase total reproductive success. Where reproduction will occur only once, every available resource flows toward the present brood. The calculations differ because the biological circumstances differ, not because one parent possesses greater devotion than another. This perspective transforms the meaning of parental care itself. It becomes something more intricate than unconditional protection and more enduring than momentary sacrifice. Natural selection has shaped systems capable of adjusting investment according to changing conditions, preserving behaviors that repeatedly produced the greatest number of surviving descendants across immense spans of evolutionary history. The result is not inconsistency, it is extraordinary precision. What the ocean ultimately assembled was neither relentless tenderness nor relentless efficiency alone. It produced parents capable of both nurturing and withdrawal, both persistence and sacrifice, according to the demands imposed by their own bodies and environments. Across roughly 400 million years, this remarkable balance has continued generating new life without interruption. The enduring pattern is not unconditional care, nor calculated consumption in isolation. It is the seamless union of both within the same living parent, each emerging exactly when biology determines that it serves the future of the lineage most effectively. Perhaps the deepest current running beneath every story in this journey has never belonged to the animals themselves. It has flowed instead through the ideas we carry into the water, ideas so familiar that they often escape notice until another living world reflects them back in an unfamiliar form. Many people inherit the belief that parental love exists beyond all calculation. It is imagined as something absolute, untouched by changing circumstances, incapable of measuring cost against benefit. Within that picture, the devoted parent protects without limit, regardless of hunger, exhaustion, danger, or future consequence. It is an image that feels complete because it aligns with the stories people tell about care, sacrifice, and family. Yet the ocean has spent roughly 400 million years, producing countless generations under relentless natural selection, and its record tells a different story. Again and again, unrelated species have evolved parents that invest remarkable energy in guarding eggs, defending nests, cleaning embryos, carrying developing young, and surrendering valuable opportunities to feed or reproduce. Those acts are unmistakably costly. They preserve life through genuine expenditure of time and energy. Then, under particular physiological conditions, many of those same parents cross a threshold where continued investment no longer increases reproductive success. At that point, the behavior changes with astonishing precision. Nothing about that transition erases the care that came before it. The father that guarded his brood through long days of vigilance truly guarded it. The mother that carried developing young, while her own reserves steadily declined, truly bore that burden. Every movement, every defense, every sacrifice represented real biological investment. What changes is not the authenticity of the effort. What changes is the relationship between present cost and future reproductive return, a relationship shaped over immense spans of evolutionary history rather than within the lifetime of any single parent. Seen from that perspective, care and calculation no longer appear to occupy opposite ends of a spectrum. Instead, calculation becomes the architecture that allows enduring care to exist at all. Natural selection preserves parental behavior because, across generations beyond ordinary imagination, those behaviors increased the survival of descendants. The calculations occur through hormones, neural pathways, chemical signals, and inherited physiology rather than conscious reflection. Yet, they remain calculations in the evolutionary sense, continuously adjusting investment to changing conditions. The deep-sea octopus does not stand outside this framework. Her prolonged vigil appears limitless because every feature of her life history directs the calculation toward complete commitment. She possesses only a single opportunity to reproduce. Preserving future resources serves no purpose when no future reproductive attempt exists. Under those conditions, the same biological logic that leads another parent to withdraw investment instead carries her through years of unwavering protection until her own body can sustain the effort no longer. The goby arrives at a different destination without following a different principle. Future breeding opportunities remain available, making the preservation of energy itself an investment in descendants yet to come. The threshold, therefore, lies elsewhere. One parent gives everything to the present brood. Another preserves enough to create the next. Both strategies emerge from the same evolutionary foundation, expressed through different lives and different constraints. What these animals ultimately reveal is not the absence of love, nor its replacement by cold arithmetic. they reveal that the distinction between those ideas may never have been as clear as it first appeared. Across the immense history of life beneath the sea, devotion and biological calculation have advanced together, woven so completely into the same living fabric that separating one from the other becomes almost impossible. The ocean offers neither contradiction nor comfort. It offers only the enduring pattern from which both have always emerged. There is a remarkable continuity that binds every creature alive today, one that reaches far beyond species, oceans, continents, and ages. It is not a continuity built from appearance or behavior alone, but from success repeated across unimaginable spans of time. Every living organism is connected by an uninterrupted sequence of reproduction, each generation linked to the one before it, through parents whose inherited biology carried life forward once again. The lineage that survives is not necessarily the lineage of the parent that invested the greatest effort, nor the one that endured the greatest hardship. It belongs to the parent whose inherited strategies, whatever form they took, succeeded often enough to place descendants into the future. Those descendants repeated the process, then their descendants after them, forming a living chain that stretches back approximately 3.8 billion years to the earliest self-replicating molecules that emerged within Earth's ancient seas. The small goby belongs to that chain. The vigilant damselfish belongs to that chain. The watchful cichlid belongs to that chain. The deep-sea octopus belongs to that chain as well. They differ in shape, lifespan, habitat, and behavior, yet every one of them carries instructions refined across immense evolutionary time, instructions preserved because they continued producing descendants, generation after generation. Within that same unbroken history lie nests carefully prepared from sand and stone, currents directed across developing eggs by patient fins, determined charges against approaching predators, and long periods during which feeding ceased while offspring remained under protection. There also exist broods reduced when continued investment no longer served future reproduction, developing young consumed so that others might eventually exist, and physiological exchanges that recovered valuable nutrients at moments when survival itself depended upon them. Every one of these acts emerged from the same enduring process. None stood apart from the history that followed. The record preserved within the oceans is therefore neither cruel nor gentle. It is consistent. Across changing coastlines, shifting climates, drifting continents, and repeated environmental upheavals, natural selection continued, refining parental behavior toward whatever produced descendants most reliably under local conditions. 5 great mass extinctions reshaped the living world. Ice advanced and retreated across vast regions. Entire marine ecosystems disappeared while others arose in their place. Through every transformation, reproduction continued, adapting without interruption, carrying inherited solutions into landscapes that had never existed before. That continuity gives remarkable perspective to every example encountered along this journey. The father guarding his brood and the mother surrendering her final reserves are not isolated curiosities. They are expressions of principles tested across spans of time so immense that ordinary history occupies only the final moments. Their behaviors differ because their circumstances differ. Their purpose remains the same. Each belongs to a lineage that has persisted because the balance between care and expenditure repeatedly produced another generation capable of continuing the sequence. Even now, far below the reach of sunlight, water moves gently across rocky ledges and sheltered nests. Somewhere beneath the surface, a parent remains beside developing eggs, circulating fresh water across fragile embryos, defending them against wandering predators. While the inherited mechanisms guiding every movement continue their ancient work, the threshold that would redirect those behaviors has not yet arrived. Investment still offers the greatest return, and the physiology shaped across countless generations continues exactly as it has for ages beyond imagination. The parent cannot perceive the immense history carried within those actions. The ocean, through the patient accumulation of evolution, already has. It continues, writing the same enduring story, one generation after another, preserving an unbroken line that has never ceased reaching toward the future.